Great, we'll call this meeting to order at 9:03 now on March 22nd, 2023. Just closing the door so I don't bother people here. And does it look like we have a quorum?
Yes, Mark, was 30% of the members present, so that would be a quorum.
Okay. Let's start with introductions. My name is Mark Parker. I'm the district manager for Monument Sanitation District.
I think we can all see everybody's name. Can we just dispense with the introductions?
Yep. I'm not sure. Okay, there I go. I can see everybody's name now. Wonderful. I need a motion to approve the agenda as proposed or sent out.
Mr. Vice Chair, if we could, this is Jared Verner at PPACG. Staff would like to add 2 items onto the agenda under the information items. Discussion of House Bill 23-1221 establishing drinking water quality standards, and then discussion on proposed PFAS national primary drinking water regulations. The board of directors for PPACG requested that this committee weigh in on both of those items just because they are not experts in this area, and you guys are, and I just kind of wanted to have an idea of what those 2 possible things would mean in a broad scale. So we would like to ask that those 2 items be added to the agenda if possible.
I don't see a problem with that. Does anybody have any issues with that?
I do not. I'll make a motion to add those items to the informational part.
This is Roy. I'll second.
All of favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, then I will seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended on section 6 information items.
Is that what we just did?
I thought we made a motion to add those items.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
A second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Any public comments or presentations that are not on the agenda?
Mr. Vice Chair, we have not received anyone indicating they want to submit public comment before the meeting started.
Wonderful. We'll move on. Consent items. Seek a motion to approve all the consent items as presented.
This is Roy. I'll make a motion to approve the consent items, which appear to just be the minutes from the January 23rd meeting.
Yep.
January
25th.
25th meeting.
Right, yeah.
Come on, Roy.
I stand corrected. Well, I had my mouth full of donut.
Oh. Apparently, we all need to go to security for meetings.
But he said I'm not Sharon.
No, you're Roy. How would you be Sharon? All right, sorry guys. Action items. Site application, site location for the Reagan Ranch Metro District lift station.
Hey, Mark, you want to take a quick roll call on the consents? We got a proper motion in a second. I think we just need to take a roll call.
Oh, all in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? That's what happens when you get sidetracked with donuts.
Exactly. Thanks, Roy.
Moving on. Thanks, Jim, for that. At least somebody's paying attention here. Site application, site location for the Reagan Ranch Metro District lift station plumber engineering. I believe SARC has already been all through this and approved it and moved it on for our approval to move to the board of directors, I believe is how that all falls.
Mr. Chair, this
Is
is
there-
Ann. Yes, that is correct. And SARC heard it and recommended that it move forward on the 10th of March.
Okay, is there any comments, questions, or concerns about this?
Were they gonna make a presentation to us?
I do not know. And
Yes, Mr. Chair, they typically do. So I asked them to give us a similar presentation as to what they presented to the SARC a couple weeks ago.
okay, are they here to do that?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Looks like
Tiffany
I'm
Miller.
here. I could share my screen if you would like, or I could just talk, whichever you would prefer. But I do have a small presentation put together that kind of summarizes all the information in the site app. So let me know when you can see my screen and I will start.
I can.
Great.
Yep.
So this site app is for a new lift station just northwest of the Colorado Springs Airport. It's going to be serving a new development in this area that will include single-family homes, multifamily, commercial, and industrial development properties. After this is built out, it will be transferred to CSU and they will take ownership of the lift station. The lift station will be in the south portion of the development, and then we will be pumping the gravity flow all the way up to an existing manhole up here that will take the flow to the Las Vegas water treatment plant. In terms of loading, we have residential, commercial, and industrial flows. We use the CSU recommended loading rates for each of these properties to come up with a max monthly average daily flow. And then during our conversations with CSU, they gave us an appropriate peaking factor. So that comes out to about 1.5 MGD that the station will initially be pumping. And then in the future, when another development comes online referred to as Norwood, a site application will be put in to expand the pumping capacity to 2.3 MGD. Based off of the typical 30-day BOD, we calculated what the average loading to the downstream water treatment plant would be. So this kind of summarizes the number. In terms of hydraulic capacity, the Las Vegas water treatment plant has a 75 MGD capacity. So in this initial site app, we're only sending 0.462 MGD on an average daily basis. So it's less than 1% of the capacity. And then in terms of organic loading, they can treat about 124,000 pounds per day. And we'll be sending about 1.1% of loading to the downstream water treatment plant. The lift station will eventually be a quadplex, so 4 pumps total. That's at the build-out design that I mentioned when the second development comes online. But for this site app, it looks like we'll end up having 3 pumps, so 2 duty. 2 pumps will handle the total peak flow, and then we'll have a standby or redundant pump in case there is an emergency and it needs to kick on. We're also currently designing dual force mains. So initially when the flow startups are low, we will pump through the 8-inch. And then as we build out this initial design, and then in the future, with the build out of the Norwood property, we'll switch to the 14-inch. The lift station will also have an emergency storage. So typically CSU ask us to design around 1 hour of peak hourly flow, assuming that they can get there within 1 hour's time. That's their typical response time. So we'll be designing emergency storage for 1 hour of the future build out peak hourly flow. So it'll be very oversized for the initial design, and then it'll be have sufficient capacity for at least 1 hour of the build out design. The station will also include wet well mixers to keep the water in the wet well mixed in case when the pumps are not pumping, and then it won't go anoxic. There will also be an odor scrubber, which will eliminate odors whenever there's an operator on site and the hatches are open. And then we will also have an emergency generator on site that will be sized to run all 4 pumps should the station lose power. And then in terms of schedule, the Reagan Ranch will be covering the cost for the lift station, and then, like I said, CSU will take ownership of it. So this is kind of the cost that we're looking at on the high end. We're seeing costs about $11 million. That includes the lift station and the force main, and then average price is about $7 million. And then this is our schedule of activities. We're anticipating getting approval from CDPHE and PPACG this month. And based off of that schedule, we'll be submitting our final design in June, getting our final approval in August, and then commencing in September. And we're anticipating about 12 to 13 months for construction. And that's it for me. If you guys have any questions after this meeting, you can email me, or if you have any electrical questions, I did put my colleague's contact here.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. It was a good refresher for myself again. Any comments, questions, or concerns on this? I know at the SARC committee meeting is one big thing that we had come up or whatever was the 1 hour overflow tank for this, and again, due to location and the assumption that they will get somebody there within the hour. Well, if they get there at 50 minutes or whatever, there's not much tank room left to troubleshoot. So that was one of the big ones, was the amount of flow with the amount of backup that would be available.
Right, and that peak hour flow is, assuming a worst case condition, that's assuming, the entire development is built out. That's assuming we've had a very strong storm event, et cetera. So that number is very, very conservative. And so when we look at it on a more average daily basis, we probably have 4 to 5 hours of response time. So we feel it's a conservative amount to do the 1 hour of the peak hour flow.
Yeah, conservative is not a term we use in wastewater often. Everything goes wrong.
Yeah. No.
At the worst possible time.
One comment that I had brought up at the Lower Fountain Water Quality Management was, at what point do you guys take a look at bringing a pipeline south to the regional facility that CSU is a part of? And I think I remember an email where they addressed part of that. I don't know if any of that was brought up in the SARC or not.
Yeah, Jim, I believe
Sorry.
Jonathan brought that up.
Yeah, and CSU was present in that meeting, and we did look at that option, but the way that it naturally drains, it wants to naturally drain across the airport. So to connect to the south infrastructure, it would have to be a very, very large gravity main, and it would have to be very deep, like 30 plus feet deep. So to us, it didn't seem feasible to connect to the south infrastructure. So that's why we proposed to tie into their north infrastructure.
And Jim, if you could clarify for everybody, what is the South Regional Plant? Is that Fountain's wastewater plant?
Well, it's a co-owner. I mean, it's a regional facility, and Colorado Springs has a small ownership in it, and Fountain Sanitation District has a majority ownership in it, and Colorado Center has the remaining ownership. But yeah, I mean, the intent, and CSU has adjusted the, I guess, the plan for service area and taken this area out. But, you know, at one time it was designed or anticipated that almost all the way up to 94 would go to this regional plant. But I know their plans have changed and costs and money and all that other stuff. But, you know, we'll cross that bridge. I mean, it just seems like you're always putting money to go over the hill when you should be some time or another face the fact, let's just go gravity south. But, you know, but I understand the timing and all that. I just want to make note of it, I guess.
Yep, agreed. Any other comments or concerns, questions on this?
So Mark, I guess the bottom line is the SARC voted to move it forward to this group without additional information required or anything else. And I guess the lower Fountain essentially did the same thing.
Yes, Roy, that would be correct.
Right.
We voiced our concerns, and Jonathan with CSU answered the questions. Again, you know, the capacity, the 1 hour capacity still came up, but you know, with their explanations and stuff like that. But you know, all of us in the wastewater business know that if things are going to go south, then they do it at the worst possible time. And so,
yeah.
So Mark, what was the resolution on that? I mean, is 1 hour of storage enough, or do you need 1 hour of storage plus, I don't know, some sort of an electrical plug-in on the outside of the building to plug in a portable generator if the issues are stemming from a power outage?
well, there is an on-site generator that will handle all this, but so there will be power backup. And if I remember correctly, Jonathan from CSU did say that there is either a spare pump in the hole on standby that's not being used, or there will be one basically on the shelf. And he said basically they could get their vac trucks or trailers out there on that, and pretty much, you know, and I guess the conclusion is like, well, if you overflow it on the ground, it's your license, not ours. And he assured us, being Jonathan, that they felt comfortable approving that and accepting that responsibility.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that CDPHE has a hard and fast on overflow storage. It does, I think, fall back on reasonable response time by the facility owner.
Right. Any other concerns, questions? Then
This is Roy.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, whoever that was.
it was Mark. I was just getting ready to ask for a motion to approve.
Yeah, I'd make a motion that we provide favorable approval and move the application forward to the PPACG.
This is Jim. I'll second that.
All in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then we will move this on to the PPACG board for final approval on it, and get this moving forward. And you know, they did say that Norwood would flow into this thing, and it was going to be, I guess, a little bit of time before Norwood got started, but we all know how development starts around here. So moving on, does anybody have anything for information items?
Mr. Vice Chair, I was just
We
gonna
have
throw in,
the two
Okay.
items.
yep,
Yes. Then
and
the floor is
I'm
all
happy-
yours.
Was that me or was that someone else? I'm sorry.
Nope, that's for you.
Okay, so reintroduce myself again, Public Information Officer for PPACG. My name's Jared Verner. There were two items that the legislative committee that we have meets every Monday. And this particular bill was brought up to our attention by our lobbyists. There was, on the surface, this looks like it's primarily a housekeeping, standardizing kind of bill, but the legislative committee wanted to make sure just that they weren't making any assumptions, just because this is just not their strong area of expertise. The first hearing is in a committee meeting tomorrow morning. And while we don't need any kind of firm resolution on whether this will create any impact or not, they wanted to at least get the opinion of anybody on this committee on any thoughts that they had. Some of the board members had reached out to their respective utilities, and it sounded like it was relatively, like I said, minor housekeeping, record standardization, but there was that concern they wanted to kind of reach out to the experts, for lack of better terms.
Jared, can you give me that bill number again?
Sure, this is House Bill 23-1221. The title is Water Quality Data Standards.
Honestly, I'm not sure I'm familiar with it, so I probably need to do some work to get up to speed on it. Jesse, have you heard anything about it?
I've seen some email traffic regarding it, but I'm gonna have to go back to that email traffic and refamiliarize myself.
Yeah, this is Mark. I was just wondering if this had also gone to PPRWA, seeing that most of them deal with water and wastewater also, if they, and because again, I haven't heard anything from Dick Brown on that one. It doesn't like stand out or anything like that. So
Yeah, I guess now that I see it, it does ring a bell. And I think, as Jared said, maybe it's a bit innocuous, but it sounded like it just required, I don't know, scientific standards or something be applied to data. And it just from reading it didn't sound like a bad idea, but I don't recall any of the groups that I'm a part of really weighing in on it. So I haven't heard any bells going off or red lights flashing or anything. So I guess it's something we're not too concerned about.
This is Connie King. I heard a discussion about this bill in the Colorado Water Congress Water Quality Committee meeting. And they had Representative Matt Soper join the meeting so that he could discuss this because it's his bill. And he said the original bill was 40 pages long. He said the bill is now only 1 page long, which doesn't look accurate from what you have on your screen. But he said they were trying to solve the problem and use current and scientifically accurate data. Data is important, collected with a chain of custody, not collected by the local club. And I think, the concern is there are some organizations collecting data that don't have the scientific expertise and don't follow the correct procedures to collect the samples and have them analyzed. And so the emphasis is making sure we have scientific data and we know where the pollutant is coming from. So I think this is something that's important to wastewater treatment facilities.
It sounds like something we should be more in support of. And I just pulled it up on the bill tracker, and it's got 3 pages from the legislative bill tracker. So
it does have 3 pages. The first page is relatively just. So, I mean, whenever Representative Soper says 1 page, it's 1+, but yeah, it's of actual bills. It's one of the shorter ones.
No, and then I remember something about this bill now that Connie had spoke up, and yeah, I mean, it seems more like common sense, and that we should support this. So.
Asking for the follow-up question our board members will probably ask, are we aware of any agencies within our 3-county district or our 3-county area that we are looking over that would be impacted that maybe aren't following some of these processes and procedures as well?
I guess we're not aware of any.
Okay. And obviously that's something they can discuss with their own wastewater districts, but.
Yeah. I don't know if that gives you enough to go on, Jared. The groups that generally, or to kind of summarize, I think the groups that generally weigh in on legislation haven't, as far as I know, in this particular bill. And I don't know if it's appropriate for us to do that or not. We never, as I recall, we never really have considered that as one of our functions. So
no, and I don't think we need a support or opposed position. It's more just what the concern is there anything in here that would impact anything that you guys do or anything at the jurisdictional level that they need to be aware of? That I think they had the same on the surface. This looks relatively, this looks like a good bill, but they didn't know this world well enough to put a position in when all of a sudden it might have massive impacts for everybody. So I think it's more of a due diligence question than anything else.
sure.
I don't think it would affect us. I mean, we're doing it by science. Not everybody else is, but we are.
Yeah.
That works. I've got what I need to report back to the board unless anyone else has something else.
No, I think that's a really good segue, though, into the next question.
Ouch.
With regard to the science, I think that's one of the questions that will be asked as this process goes on.
So moving on to the second question, this one is not nearly as timely. I think it was more so from the board's perspective. Obviously, certain jurisdictions are much more impacted than others, but just I think awareness or a request for this committee to just kind of be aware. They know that this committee is going to be following this as much as they can. This is a much more of an unknown future in terms of what this impacts for everybody else. I don't know if we need a firm. They weren't asking for any kind of firm opinions on this because this just came out and a lot of things are changing so quickly. But if anyone had initial thoughts, or at least to if there's anything that you guys see to pass it on, and we can pass it on to the board for their awareness.
This is Jim. I got a question for Connie. Connie, do you know if they've done a Superfund designation yet? I know they were thinking about it, but
I haven't seen anything about the Superfund designation yet. But that's my understanding too, that they're working on it. So I don't know where that's going.
You're talking about designating PFAS as a hazardous material, or?
Yep,
Yeah, I think that's still in progress.
the old CERCLA stuff and all whatever.
Yeah, it seems like the consensus is that's going to happen in some manner, but I think it's not done yet. So Jared, I can kind of, first of all, this is probably at least initially more of an issue for the Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority and for water providers. I guess the thought is that whatever EPA decides as far as drinking water standard will ultimately trickle down, pun intended, to wastewater and all other areas of life, I guess, once they establish these regulations. But as far as the process goes, I guess it's got to be published in the Federal Register, and that's supposed to happen within a week or two, I guess, perhaps by the end of the month. And then that starts the clock ticking on a 60-day comment period, public comment period. There's going to be a public hearing, I think it's on May 4th, that's kind of in the middle of that comment period. And then it seems like the way the calendar works, and they want to establish these regulations, I think, by the end of the year or so. That's only going to give EPA maybe a month or two to go through all the public comments and try to, do whatever it is they do. And then once the regulations are established, they'll take effect in 3 years. So I think as far as the public comment period, once that starts, there's going to be a real frenzy from within the industry to make comments. I think as far as Security Water District is concerned, we'll probably rely heavily on the American Water Works Association to speak on our behalf, and I think they're very competent in analyzing all the ins and outs of the regulation. There's just a lot of stuff in here to sort out, so it's hard to. I mean, we could spend the rest of the day probably talking about it, but in a nutshell, that's my take. I've already signed up for the public hearing on May 4th, I believe it is, just to give EPA our perspective of the amount of money. And I think, just off the top of my head, I know that in excess of $30 million has been spent on behalf of Security Water District. Happily, I guess most of that was spent by the federal government and the Air Force, so not the local ratepayers. But this regulation, as it's written, I think will affect many, many, many water systems nationwide. And again, happily, Security is already treating, and we're after treatment, we're showing non-detect for the 6 chemicals that are being regulated. But the levels are so low that, these levels are in Fountain Creek and in, many source waters. And so it's going to have a huge cost impact. And sorry to dominate, I'm sure there's others that want to speak too, but, I did the math quickly. There's been numbers thrown out that the federal government has, I guess, earmarked $10 billion nationwide for, to deal with PFAS. And if you do the math, if you divide that by 50, that's 200 million for Colorado. And in our case, at least 25 million was spent for treatment. So that's only 8 systems of our size that could be fully funded by that federal allocation. Certainly the lion's share of that money you would think would go to California, New York, and Florida and Texas. So $10 billion really isn't all that much. You know, that used to be real money, but it's not anymore. So anyway, I'll shut up. That's my perspective.
Roy, I'm reading something about the bipartisan infrastructure law or whatever. It's only 2 billion in emerging.
Right. Well,
okay.
I think 10 billion is the biggest number I've heard, and then like within almost in the same breath they said 9 billion. So somewhere $1 billion went somewhere while, you know, just while they were talking about it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around. So you're right, but I just did the math on 10 billion and it's not much. It's not going to go very far. So the bottom line is, and I think people really need to understand this, you know, in our case, we've already sued the Air Force and the chemical manufacturers, and that litigation is in progress. But when people say make the polluters pay, okay, you know, they can say that, but nobody has a way to do it. It's the ratepayers that are going to pay for this. So I just feel like people need to understand how that's going to work. And now I'm really going to shut up.
I know, I greatly appreciate it. Oh, sorry, go for it, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, any other comments or whatever. Thanks, Roy. You're always a wealth of information on this. So, and I agree, this needs to go to PPRWA more than us. But again, the only thing I would ask is if you can email out these 2 items that you've provided to us.
That won't be a problem.
Because I know there's some regulations coming down for the wastewater side on this also, that you can't discharge it into streams or whatever. I don't understand it 100%, but I know they're looking at it on the wastewater discharger side too. So
yeah, so I don't know if PPACG would like a presentation at some point by PPRWA, and I'm just throwing that out. I'm not sure who would want to do it, or what the appropriate timing would be. I guess on the one hand, I think that comments by everybody who's impacted would be beneficial, but on the other hand, my skeptical view is, you know, whether they'll do any good anyway, or whether EPA's already made up their mind. So I guess nobody knows the answer to that.
Roy, would this be something that would fall under Dick Brown by any chance, or?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, he deals primarily, I think, and Jesse, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he deals more with state issues, and Dick Brown is really smart. So I'm sure he'll know plenty about this, but there's probably also people at CSU that know quite a bit about it.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So I guess if PPACG would like a presentation, we could try to figure out who that would be. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not really offering anything, but you know, we can try to figure that out if PPACG would like to see that.
I'm at least happy to take it back to the executive committee and see what their thoughts are. This one more came up because I think they saw the headlines last week and there was like, oh, how does this impact us? So even knowing if it needs to really kind of go through the PPRWA, but again, does it, as it trickles down, does it impact on the wastewater side? Maybe not as heavily, but I think they would probably be interested in hearing about it, whether it's a workshop kind of session after the main meeting, just to be able to ask a lot of these questions. What's the timeline and all these different things. So I will go back to those board members and see what exactly they're looking at. I will say, just awareness, the next round of board meetings is April 12th and May 10th. Are the two next board meetings. So we'd probably be looking at something around those dates if they ended up wanting something.
And I guess I'd say, Jared, that with regard to wastewater, I think it's going to be probably years before we know what the impact will be, probably for water systems. And the other thing that, at least for small systems, they may not even know yet if they're going to be impacted. We've got a bunch of sampling that's going to be done over the next few years. And in fact, this regulation requires sampling, but if people haven't sampled yet, they don't know. And there's not really been much of it. Well, there's been some voluntary sampling in Colorado, but I think only about half the water systems participated in that. So, honestly, there's more questions than answers, and I don't know. I don't know when that's going to change. So I don't know, Connie, if you have any other thoughts on any of that.
Roy, I agree. Eventually it's going to affect everybody, and many systems don't know yet where they stand as far as the PFAS concentrations in their system. And that, I think that's true for both water treatment systems and wastewater treatment systems. So, but from everything I've read, the PFAS seems to be everywhere and in everything. And so it's going to go on for a long time and impact probably everyone. And the question about who's going to pay for it, I agree with you. The ratepayers are probably going to have to pay for it, because the process of going after the polluters takes years or decades, and once it all gets split up, how much is that really going to be? Maybe not much for an individual wastewater or water treatment system.
So Jared, to answer your question, yes and yes, it will affect everyone.
That works. I greatly appreciate the discussion. That gives me something to go back. I would imagine they'll probably want some sort of briefing, is probably a strong word, but just some way of just getting their arms around it. But what that looks like, ultimately, we'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, and again, Jared, I think if they let us know, well, again, I can't commit to it, but if they give us an indication when they want it, things are going to change. Like I say, if it's during the comment period, that's a little bit different than after the comment period. It's going to evolve through the rest of the year, so it may be a little bit different presentation depending on the timing of it.
Right. All right, I appreciate it, Vice Chair. Unless there's anything else, I'll pass it back to you.
Wonderful. Anything else for information items? Okay, we'll move on to member entity announcements. Hearing none, we'll move on to meeting schedule. The next meeting should be April 26th at 9 a.m., same place and time, and we'll go from there. And with that being said, I'll seek a motion for adjournment.
So
I'll
moved.
make that motion. I'll second.
Okay. Motion made by Jesse, seconded by Jim. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 Aye. All righty. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.